The first frost of winter had painted the cobblestones silver overnight. Lynn stepped through the iron gate of the old willow tea house, breath blooming white in the dawn air, the frayed hem of his scholar's robe whispering against his ankles. Inside, the hearth crackled low, casting tiger-strip shadows across lacquered tables. The scent of roasted oolong and sweet bean paste curled like incense that he had come to warm his bones. Nothing more. His purse, worn silk patched 3 times, was as flat as a river stone. 1 cup, he told himself, paid for with the last coin clenched between finger and callus. Then back to the unheated garret, back to the scrolls he could no longer afford to have rebound at the counter. A small commotion that an old man in a faded indigo coat fumbled through empty pockets, cheeks flushing the color of persimmon. His fingers shook. The sound of cloth against cloth was dry and hopeless. I was certain, he stammered, voice thin as rice paper. The tea master's eyes flicked to the line forming behind him, impatient steam rising from kettles. Lynn's gaze snagged on the stranger's hands. Ink-stained, the nails trimmed short, a scholar's hands. Like mine, he thought, before fate chewed them down to the bone. The next breath happened without permission. Lynn stepped forward, boots creaking on the old boards. From his sleeve he drew the single coin, copper warm from his palm, and laid it on the counter with a soft clink that sounded louder than temple bells. 2 bowls of dragon well, he said quietly, and a pair of sesame cakes. The tea master's eyebrow arched, but the coin was good. He scooped leaves into 2 clay cups, steam unfurling like dragon's breath. The old man stared, astonishment widening the map of wrinkles around his eyes. Young friend, I cannot. Lynn shook his head. The tea grows cold faster than pride, uncle. He pressed the second cup across the counter until their fingers brushed, paper-thin skin against winter-chapped knuckles. They took a table by the window. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall, soft as moth wings. The old man cradled his cup with both hands, as though guarding a candle flame. Your name? He asked. Lynn. Lynn Fong. Fong wind. The old man mused. Carries seeds farther than birds. He sipped, savoring. I am Zhou. Once a teacher, now merely an old man who forgets his wallet. Lin smiled, but it did not reach the hollow beneath his ribs. He thought of rent due, of the inkstone chipped beyond repair, of the exam that could lift him or crush him. In 2 moons Zhou studied him over the rim of his cup. You give your last coin to a stranger. Why? Because today you are the stranger, Lin answered. Tomorrow it might be me. Silence settled, comfortable and fragile. The old man broke his sesame cake in half and slid the larger piece toward Lin. The gesture felt ancient, ritual. When they rose to leave, Zhou pressed something into Lin's hand. A square of paper folded smaller than a fingernail. For later, he said, eyes twinkling like starlight on frost. Then he vanished through the beaded curtain before Lin could protest. Alone again, Lin unfolded the paper. Inside, a single line of ink brushed in confident strokes. The wind remembers every kindness. He read it twice, heart beating oddly. Outside, the snowfall thickened, erasing footprints almost as soon as they formed. Lin tucked the note inside his sleeve, next to the hollow space where a coin used to be. The tea house's bell jingled behind him, gentle as fate clearing its throat. He did not see the old man watching from across the street, a smile ghosting across weathered lips, nor the imperial seal hidden inside Zhou's coat. He only felt, with the certainty of frost forming on plum blossoms, that something had begun to turn, slow and inexorable as the seasons themselves. Dawn after dawn, the old willow tea house became Lin's chapel and Zhou his unappointed tutor. The frost melted into a thin, persistent drizzle that jeweled every roof tile. Yet the scholar arrived before the kettles sang, sleeves still frayed, shoes still cracked. Zhou was always there first, seated at the same low table beside the lattice window, as though he had grown out of the cedar planks like an ancient bonsai. Their ritual was wordless at the start. Lin would bow. Zhou would tilt his head exactly 1 finger width, no more, no less, and push a steaming cup across the scarred wood. The first sip burned away the night's hunger. The second loosened the knots in Lin's thoughts. Only then did Zhou speak, and never more than a handful of syllables at a time. "What carries weight without substance?" he asked one morning, rain ticking against the paper panes. Lin considered the steam curling between them. "Memory," he answered. Zhou's eyes crinkled. He tore a corner from yesterday's newspaper, folded it into a tiny boat, and floated it on the surface of his tea. The boat spun, darkened, dissolved. "Memory sinks," he corrected gently. "Try again tomorrow." Each day a new riddle. Each answer Lin gave, right or wrong, earned a scrap of paper. By the end of the week, the inside of his sleeve rustled with fortune cookie wisdom. A single coin is louder than a purse of gold. The inkstone starves when the heart is full. Wind chooses no direction until the mountain speaks. Lin's purse never grew heavier. His robe thinned until the weave showed skin. The landlord threatened locks. The bookseller refused credit. Yet the riddles kept coming, and Lin began to notice things he had never seen. The way Zhou's chopstick never clinked against porcelain. The way his shadow sometimes seemed longer than the lamplight allowed. The way the other patrons unconsciously lowered their voices when the old man cleared his throat. One dusk, Zhou arrived with a cracked bamboo flute tucked beneath his sash. He played no melody, only 3 notes, rising, falling, rising again. The sound pierced the smoky air like a needle through silk. When he finished, he laid the flute in Lin's palm. "For you. I have no music in me," Lin protested. "Then learn the space between notes." Lin carried the flute home that night. In his freezing room, he blew softly. The reed gave a wounded sigh. He tried again. By morning, 3 notes threaded together like the beginning of a story. He could not yet read. Snow returned. Zhou began arriving with calligraphy scrolls no wider than a finger. Each strip held a single character written in cursive so fluid it seemed alive. Lin studied them over weak rice porridge. Ren, endure. Kong, emptiness. Ming, brightness. Zhou said nothing. The characters spoke for themselves. On the 10th morning, Zhou did not come. Lin waited until the kettles cooled, until the tea master began stacking chairs. Panic pricked him. Had the old man fallen ill? Had he, like so many others in the capital, simply vanished beneath winter's indifferent heel? At the threshold, Lin nearly collided with a courier boy who thrust a sealed envelope into his hand and ran off before coins could be offered. Inside, a single fold of rice paper. The character Sir examination, followed by a date, the day after tomorrow, and beneath it, in Zhou's unmistakable hand, "Bring the flute." Lin's heart hammered like a drum in a festival procession. He pressed the paper to his chest, feeling the ink's faint warmth seep through his threadbare robe. Outside, the first crimson streak of dawn bled across the sky, as though the heavens themselves were underlining the note. That night he did not sleep. He sat cross-legged on his pallet, flute balanced on his knees, repeating the 3 notes until they became a mantra. With each breath, the room grew less cold, the ceiling less low. Somewhere in the darkness, he thought he heard Zhou's quiet laughter, or perhaps only the wind threading through cracked shutters. When the last star faded, Lin rose, wrapped the flute in a scrap of faded silk, and tucked the sheaf of riddles inside his sleeve. The snow had stopped. The city lay hushed, expectant, as if holding its breath for whatever came next. At the tea house gate, the tea master paused in sweeping slush. "He left this for you," he said, producing a small bronze token the size of a coin but etched with the imperial dragon. The weight of it settled into Lin's palm like destiny made metal. Lin closed his fingers around it. For the first time since his father died, he felt the ground beneath him tilt. Not toward ruin, but toward something vast and unspoken. He stepped into the street, boots crunching fresh snow, the token warm against his skin, the flute's 3-note echo threading the cold air. Somewhere ahead, the gates of the examination hall waited, iron teeth glinting in the newborn light. And somewhere even farther, Zhou's quiet smile hovered like the promise of spring. The capital rose before Lin like a mountain of jade and iron. Red walls 3 men high, banners snapping in a wind that smelled of gunpowder and lacquer, and everywhere the rustle of silk robes and nervous ambition. He had walked 10 li before dawn, boots stuffed with straw to hide the holes. The bronze token pressed so tightly to his ribs it left a bruise shaped like a dragon. At the gate of auspicious virtue, guards counted candidates like sheep. Each man carried scrolls and dreams in equal measure. Each man smelled of camphor and fear. Lin's stomach growled, 3 days of nothing but hot water and the memory of sesame cakes. When the guard jabbed a spear but toward him, he flinched, expecting ridicule, but the bronze token flashed beneath his tattered lapel. The guard's eyes widened. He stepped aside as though Lin had become invisible. Inside, the courtyard swallowed sound. 1,000 brush pens scratched the air in unison, a dry, insect-like chorus. Candidates knelt at low tables, backs straight as sabers, inkstones glinting like black ice. Lin found his place. 3rd row, 5th desk, the wood still warm from the man before him. He laid out his brush, his ink, the single sheet of rice paper permitted. Across the top, in vermilion seal script, Imperial Civil Examination, Year of the Fire Phoenix. A bell tolled once. The cavernous doors at the far end swung open. At first all he saw were silhouettes, robed officials moving like shadows behind gauze lanterns. Then the procession emerged, ministers in indigo, scribes in gray, and finally the chief examiner. Lin's breath snagged. It was Zhou. Not the stooped tea-house sage he remembered, but a figure carved from jade and starlight. The same eyes, ancient and amused, now set above a robe embroidered with writhing dragons. In his hand he carried not a flute but the imperial jade seal, green as winter bamboo. Every candidate bowed so low their foreheads brushed the floor. Lin's spine locked halfway, half bow, half shock. Zhou's gaze swept the room and lingered on Lin for the space of a heartbeat. No longer, yet it felt like the sky tilting. A smile flickered, gone before it could be named. Then he spoke, voice soft as silk sliding over steel. "Question the first," he said. "What carries weight without substance?" Lin's pulse hammered against the bruise of the dragon token. Around him, brushes hesitated. He heard the wet click of ink, the nervous swallow of the man to his left. The answer had lived on the tip of his tongue for weeks. Memory. But Zhou's eyes urged deeper. Memory sinks. Lin dipped his brush, exhaled. On the immaculate paper he wrote a single character, Yi, righteousness. Then, beneath it, smaller, the wind between mountains. He did not know why. The words arrived like birds returning to a remembered tree. Zhou moved on, but Lin felt the old man's approval settle on his shoulders like a warm cloak. Hours blurred. Question after question, each one a riddle from their dawn conversations, disguised in classical allusion and courtly phrasing. What chooses no direction? What is full by being empty? Lin wrote until his wrist burned, until the lantern oil scented the air with pine and memory. When the final bell tolled, dusk had bruised the sky purple. Snowflakes drifted through the high windows, melting on the ink before they could be swept away. Candidates filed out like ghosts. Lin lingered, heart pounding against the dragon bruise. Zhou remained on the dais, jade seal resting on a cushion. The great hall emptied until only the two of them breathed beneath the rafters. At last Zhou descended the steps, each footfall measured, deliberate. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough for Lin to see snowflakes melting on the old man's eyelashes. "You brought the flute?" Lin produced it, wrapped in the same faded silk. Zhou took it, ran a thumb along the cracked bamboo, then lifted it to his lips. 3 notes, rising, falling, rising, echoed against stone and wood and centuries of ambition. The sound was no louder than a sparrow's heartbeat, yet every lantern flame quivered in answer. Zhou lowered the flute. "The wind has carried you farther than you know." From his sleeve he drew Lin's original answer, memory, now written in imperial vermilion. He pressed the paper into Lin's palm and closed the young man's fingers around it. "Keep this. When memory sinks, righteousness floats." Outside, the palace bells began to ring for curfew, bronze voices rolling across tiled roofs. Snow fell thicker now, erasing footprints almost as quickly as they formed. Zhou turned away, robe sweeping the floor like a comet's tail. Lin stood alone beneath the lanterns, paper warm against his skin, the faint taste of sesame and oolong on his tongue. Somewhere in the distance, candidates argued over answers, guards barked orders. The machinery of empire clanked forward. But inside his chest, 3 notes and a single character glowed like coals. Righteousness, wind, and the quiet certainty that the ground beneath him had shifted forever. He stepped into the swirling snow, and for the first time since his father died, Lin did not feel small. The hall of golden chimes could swallow thunder and return only silence. Lin stood on the threshold, parchment in hand, the imperial seal's weight a bruise against his ribs. Columns of lacquered red rose higher than cedars. Lanterns hung like captive moons. Snow drifted through clear-story windows, melting on the black marble floor in perfect circles. Small, temporary mirrors of the sky 1,000 candidates had entered. Now 40 remained, kneeling in rigid rows. Their breath clouded and vanished, a slow tide of fear. Lin's knees ached against the stone, but the pain felt distant, like a story told about someone else's body. Overhead, bronze bells tolled once, deep, deliberate, final. The chief examiner ascended the dais. Zhou. Still Zhou and yet not. Imperial dragons coiled across his shoulders. The jade seal in his right hand caught fire from every lamp. His face was carved from the same marble as the hall. Yet his eyes held the same gentle amusement Lin remembered over cracked teacups. Silence stretched until it snapped. Zhou lifted a scroll. The parchment crackled like frost breaking on water. He did not read. He simply spoke, voice pitched low enough that only the candidates and the gods could hear. Lin Feng. The name rang once, then again, echoing off pillars, returning smaller, softer, until it settled in Lin's chest like a second heart. Lin rose. His legs trembled. The floor seemed to tilt. 40 pairs of eyes burned into his back. Envy, disbelief, raw hunger. He crossed the distance to the dais one step at a time, each footfall sounding louder than the bells. Zhou extended the scroll. Lin took it with both hands. The paper was warm, as though it had absorbed sunlight for centuries. At the top, in vermilion ink, the single character Kui. Champion. Below it, Zhou had brushed a line from their first morning together. The wind remembers every kindness. Lin's throat closed. The hall blurred. Snow, lanterns, faces smearing into watercolor. A hush rippled outward. The remaining candidates bowed so low their foreheads kissed cold stone. Zhou stepped down. Up close, the imperial dragons were stitched with threads so fine they seemed to move. He placed the jade seal into Lin's palm. The stone was heavier than sin, colder than regret, and yet it fit the hollow of his hand as if carved for him alone. Carry it gently, Zhou murmured. It is the weight of 10,000 dreams. Behind them, the bronze bells tolled a second time. The sound rolled through the hall, through the palace, through the city beyond, until every snowflake trembled in mid-air. Lin turned. The other candidates were still kneeling, but their faces had changed. Some wept openly. Others stared at the floor as if reading their future in the marble veins. A boy from the southern provinces. Lin remembered him coughing blood into a handkerchief last night. Looked up with something like wonder. Lin met his eyes and bowed. Not in triumph but in shared ache. A side door opened. Imperial guards in lacquered armor entered, forming a corridor of crimson and steel. Beyond the doorway lay a courtyard blanketed in untouched snow, waiting for the first footprints to decide its story. Zhou spoke again, voice carrying now, formal and vast. By decree of the Son of Heaven, Lin Feng is appointed first scribe of the Grand Secretariat, guardian of the imperial records, and voice of the people within these walls. Let every brushstroke honor the wind that carried him. The words struck Lin like warm rain. He felt the bruise on his ribs bloom into fire, into purpose. Snowflakes landed on the scroll, melted, and vanished, leaving only the red ink. Bright as dawn, a guard stepped forward, offered a cloak of midnight silk lined with fox fur. Lin draped it over his threadbare scholar's robe. The weight was both burden and benediction. He caught his reflection in a polished bronze mirror propped against a pillar. The same hollow cheeks, the same cracked boots, but the eyes, those eyes, belonged to someone else entirely. Zhou lingered a moment longer. One last riddle, he said softly, for Lin alone. What chooses no direction, yet arrives precisely where it must? Lin closed his fingers around the jade seal. The wind, he answered. Zhou smiled, small, private, like the first crack of sunlight on winter ice. Then ride it well. The procession moved. Boots thudded in unison, a heartbeat made of men. As Lin stepped across the threshold, snowflakes swirled inside the hall, kissing the lanterns, melting on the bronze bells. He left footprints, small, deliberate, irreversible, across the pristine courtyard. Behind him, the doors closed with a sound like the closing of a book. Ahead, the palace stretched in corridors of lacquer and gold, scrolls waiting to be written, histories waiting to be rewritten. In his sleeve, the square of paper Zhou had first given him fluttered against his wrist. Righteousness, wind, and the quiet certainty that every kindness, no matter how small, had carried him here. Snow kept falling. Each flake caught the lamplight for an instant, brief, brilliant, gone. Yet the path beneath his feet remained clear, shining like ink still wet with promise. Spring arrived sideways in the capital. Peach petals drifting across palace rooftops like pink snow refusing to obey gravity. Lin stood on the jade terrace of the Grand Secretariat, robe of midnight silk now embroidered with silver waves. The imperial dragon coiled over his heart instead of his shoulder. In his hand rested the bronze token Zhou had slipped him that first morning. Dragon face worn smooth by countless thumb strokes, edges warmed by the pulse in his palm. Below, the city roared softly. Markets unfurling, bells tolling the hour, children chasing kites shaped like phoenixes. From this height it looked like the living scroll he now carried inside his sleeve. Ink still wet, characters breathing. Behind him the hall of eternal records smelled of camphor and heated cedar. Scroll racks rose 3 stories high, each bamboo cylinder labeled in his own newly steady hand. Yesterday he had ordered the restoration of every name erased by previous scribes. Farmers who had once paid a cup of tea's worth of kindness and been forgotten by history. Today those names marched across fresh parchment in black strokes as sharp as winter stars. A footfall, soft, deliberate. Zhou. The old man wore no dragons now, only simple gray linen the color of rain before it falls. His hair had gone entirely white. The ink stains on his fingers had faded to pale blue ghosts. Yet his eyes held the same quiet amusement that had once watched a penniless scholar count coins as though they were years. Lin bowed, not the shallow nod of protocol, but the full bow of a student greeting dawn for the 1000th time. Zhou answered with the same single-finger-width tilt of the head, and the years collapsed into a heartbeat. No words passed between them. Instead Zhou produced a teapot no larger than a sparrow, 2 cups no bigger than acorns, and set them on the balustrade. Steam rose, carrying the scent of dragon well, grass, smoke, memory. Lin poured. Zhou accepted. They drank facing the city they now shaped with every brushstroke. When the cups were empty, Zhou set his down and tapped the rim once. The bronze token answered with a faint chime, as though recognizing its twin in porcelain. Then he reached inside his sleeve and drew out the folded paper boat Lin had watched dissolve in tea on the first morning. Miraculously whole, the paper now shimmered with gold leaf along its edges. He placed it in Lin's palm. Lin unfolded it carefully. Inside, in Zhou's unchanged brush, a single new character tone transmission. Understanding settled between them like snowfall that never reaches the ground. Lin turned to the terrace rail. Far below, a beggar child offered half a persimmon to an elderly merchant whose purse strings had snapped. The merchant bowed exactly 1 finger width. Above them, peach petals continued their slow rebellion against gravity. Lin lifted the flute Zhou had once given him. 3 notes, rising, falling, rising, slipped into the spring air. Somewhere in the city a kite string snapped. The phoenix-shaped paper climbed higher, carried by a wind that remembered every kindness. Zhou smiled, small and private. He bowed, not to the first scribe, but to the tea-house scholar who had once traded his last coin for a stranger's dignity. Then he walked away, gray robe disappearing into corridors of cedar and light, footsteps swallowed by the living hush of scrolls. Lin remained. He took the bronze token and pressed it against the freshly inked decree. From this day forward, every examination hall shall serve tea to every candidate, and no one shall pay for the first cup. Below, the city kept breathing. Peach petals landed on rooftops, on market stalls, on the cracked hands of the old woman who had served Lin tea when he had nothing but gratitude. Somewhere, a new scholar counted coins in a threadbare purse, unaware that destiny sometimes wears gray linen and smells of dragon well. Lin tucked the golden paper boat into the sleeve of midnight silk. The bronze token warmed against his wrist like a second pulse. He lifted the flute, again, played the 3 notes into the spring sky, and listened as the wind carried them farther than birds, carried them toward every kindness yet to be repaid, every future still unwritten. On the terrace rail, the 2 empty teacups steamed once more, twin ghosts of steam rising, mingling, vanishing, yet never truly gone.